Welcome to the Open Apple podcast, where we celebrate the Apple II. Whether you're a long-time user, a nostalgic visitor, or a newcomer to the community, join us as we share news and memories of Steve Wozniak's most famous personal computer.
Hello and welcome to Open Apple. This is episode 75 for October 2017. I'm your co-host, the first, Quinn Dunkey. With me as always is co-host, the second, Mike McGinnis. How you doing, Mike?
Wait a minute. How do I know you're not fake Quinn trying to pretend to be real Quinn?
I'm real Quinn / fake Carrington, maybe.
Well, now I'm really confused. How are you, Quinn?
I'm good. I'm ready to reconstitute our audience after the damage that whose name shall not be spoken did last month.
Wow, that was, all of our favorite Apple II technologies. Nope, don't like that. So this is what happens when we let an RCR podcast co-host come on the show.
Yeah, he was ragging on collectors with his weird fear of commitment agenda. And, yeah, well, for all of our remaining listeners, we appreciate you both sticking with us. So
man, oh man. How have you been, Quinn?
I've been good. I've been doing some retro computing goodness, which we'll get to later in the much missed tech segment. Is making a comeback this month.
Yay.
So stay tuned for that.
Awesome.
How about you, Mike?
I'm doing all right. I've just been enjoying some of the music from our interviewee here that we'll talk to in just a minute. And have you installed High Sierra yet on any of your Macs?
I have not on my home Mac. We've got it all at work, though.
Okay. What little Apple II emulation software stuff that I got on my iMac here at home seems to be working just fine. I was just wondering if you'd seen any weirdness about that, but since you haven't, I guess you wouldn't know.
Yeah, it's a good thing to check, though, because they break random things with every upgrade.
They sure do, and we'll talk about one of those things in the news, actually. So, yeah, but other than that, I'm doing great. Just looking forward to doing another episode.
All right, well, why don't we dive on into the aforementioned episode and get on with our interview.
Hi, I'm Henry Corbis of Ultimate Micro, and you're listening to the Open Apple podcast.
All right, this month we have with us Seth Sternberger of 8-Bit Weapon. We talked to him once before on the Lawless Legends episode, but today I think we're going to focus a little bit more on the music. They have a brand new album out that's made entirely with an Apple II that you should definitely check out. And how are you, Seth?
Very good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for being on.
So, of course, why don't we start with the 64K question that everybody wants to ask, which is how on earth did you make a music album entirely with an Apple II?
It was very hard, and it was a very long process. There was an evolution to it that started, of course, with Michael Mann. I got in touch with him back in, I want to say, 2009, when I found out about his Apple Crate experiment, and he sent me over a disc. And he basically said, before we go any further working together on a project, you have to be able to work on a real Apple II if this is going to work. So when you get a real Apple II and you've got basically ADT Pro, we'll talk. And so eventually I got one, and that we went to the next phase, which was he sent over disk images. And then I said, this is really awesome. You can play an Apple II live, which is amazing. And the sound quality is even more amazing because he's taking those 8-bit samples and pushing it through that 1-bit window. But I said the problem is if I go out on and perform with this live, I have to hit the space bar to go to the actual playing live part. But before I get even to that, I've got to type in commands to load the sounds that I want to use. I said, we need a performance version of this. So I just go on stage, turn on the Apple II, it loads straight to the performance mode, and I'm ready to go. And he did that. And so that was the next step. And then eventually we found out about, or we were contacted by Charles Mangan. And he was working on a MIDI interface experiment for what became the DMS. And so that was the next phase of the evolution, was being able to control the Apple II via MIDI, which is a huge breakthrough. So those are all the things that needed to happen to make Class Apples, the world's first Apple II album, possible. I mean, I could have, and I have recorded entire Apple II songs manually, because we had the DMS synth that you play live. So I was able to play it live and touch up the timing manually. And then we also have the DMS drummer, which was just, is a drum machine. So on the our Bits with Bytes album, the first all Apple II song that we recorded and released was called Apple Core 2, because we were afraid that if we released it as the Apple II song, we'd get sued by Apple. So, but to do a whole album like that would be, it was obviously possible. It'd just be tedious. So once we had the technology to do MIDI, combined with that, it became really simple. So we thought it would be really great to do kind of a combination of a Wendy Carlos inspired / if you ever heard of Carlos Futura, we did disco versions, Moog disco versions of classical tunes. It's kind of that combo that inspired us. And so you have Class Apples as a result. So it just blew my mind that no one, with any of the software that's out there, whether, there's lots of, there's Music Constructor Set was actually, I think, the world's first microcomputer sequencer. Nobody had created an album for the Apple II in all these years, in 40 years,
So for those of us who are a little less musically inclined, can you explain what it means to control the Apple II via MIDI? Like, what is MIDI and how does that fit into your workflow?
Yeah, so most synthesizers, you can obviously play live. There's things called modules that have no keyboards, and you have to control them with MIDI for the most part. There's other lesser known and older technologies for controlling and sequencing music with different modules and keyboards, but MIDI was created in the early 80s. It stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. Before that, there was something called voltage control, which timing-wise was way better, but it was very limited with all the commands you can send to all your machines. So MIDI took over in the early 80s. So every keyboard today has, for the most part, a MIDI port that goes in, out, and through. So you can have all of your equipment, your drum machines, your synthesizers, your sequencers, and your recording equipment all talk to each other in the same language. So MIDI makes the world go round for the most part in the electronic part of the music industry, and same so for the recording industry, because you can do a lot of studio recording techniques where you can sync up different instruments with live instruments easier via MIDI and stuff like that. So MIDI is just the language that all electronic instruments speak. So once we were able to send MIDI to the Apple II and have the Apple II understand what it was talking about, that was a huge breakthrough. And we're getting closer and closer to actually releasing the DMS MIDI box through Retro Connector very soon. We're just tightening up some loose ends.
So, Seth, have you? There's an artist, and we talked about his album a few episodes back. His name is Joe Ellie, I think it's pronounced, or Eli. He recorded an album called B484 in 1983, and he used an Apple II, a Roland 808, and an Alpha Centauri. Is that anything like what you guys have done with the Class Apples album?
It's very similar, but the big difference is we only used an Apple II for all sounds directly off the Apple II, where the Alpha Centauri is like a third-party sound card that goes into the Apple II, but not from the Apple II itself.
Oh, I see. Okay, so this is created. These sounds are actually created from the Apple II, not an expansion card that you could buy and put in there.
Yeah, not like the Mockingbird or the Cricket or anything like that.
Wow,
That's what makes it extra amazing is that a lot of people actually challenged me. They thought I was a fraud. They couldn't believe how good the Apple II sounded right off the board.
Yeah.
So I actually had to post on a few Apple II threads on Facebook a video of me and my Apple II and playing it live so they could see that it was coming out the Apple II speaker and nothing else was connected to it.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious.
Yeah, we get that actually a lot with a lot of our music, not just the Apple II, also for Commodore stuff, because we've figured out techniques to make the hardware, the native hardware, sound like real high-quality synthesizers. So everybody's used to 8-bit computers and video game consoles sounding pretty square and bleepy.
Mm-hmm.
But the Commodore 64 and now thanks to Michael, the Apple II, you can get higher fidelity sounds than people ever thought possible. So we get challenged all the time that it's not really a Commodore 64 or now a real Apple II.
Wow.
So is there any kind of post-processing that you're doing? Like, are you cleaning things up or, eliminating pops or anything like that?
Not really pops so much, although with the Commodore SID chip, there are some filter pops. But the Apple II, the thing that we did right off the bat, as you guys are probably aware, there's a lot of high-end noise.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
When you play it back a little bit, it's like a buzz that comes with everything you output on the Apple II. So we cut that out right off the bat. And then for the rest of the Class Apples album, for the most part, all you're hearing is a little bit of a combination of reverb with delay. And then for a few sounds, we added analog filters over the sound to give it more of a 70s synth sound on a few parts. But that's still we used it sparingly. So most of the album, what you're hearing is just the Apple II. And we had seen on various websites reviewing the album that they could definitely hear a little Apple II in there if you listen really hard. But for the most parts, it's other synthesizers layered in with the Apple II, and it's like you're missing the point. Everywhere we posted is, even on the website where we first released it on Bandcamp, we specifically said there was nothing but Apple II on this recording. The drums, the sounds, it's all Apple II, off the Apple II. We explained the milestones to get there with the guys, and so it's just funny how the media, as much as even when they interview you point blank, they still don't get it 100% right.
That's great, though. I mean, if you've got people in disbelief, that's a good sign that you've done something really interesting and pushing the boundaries. Yeah,
definitely. So it was a fun project. It's something that once I did a little research and figured out that nobody had done an Apple II album, I was like, we got to be the first to do this.
Well, in I guess everybody else's defense, the Apple II really wasn't known among the 8-bit computers of the day, really known for its musical output.
Right.
So that's, and so let's talk about 8-bit Weapon sort of more generally. Well, first, did you have a home computer like back in the 80s?
Yeah, a couple of them. The first computer my dad brought home was a huge Corona portable computer, which was an IBM clone, which was like a huge iron brick with a little monochrome gold monitor and one of those detachable keyboards that was really heavy. It could probably survive an EMP and a nuclear blast. So heavy duty. And I was like probably 9 at the time when I saw this beast. And so, but there weren't any games really for it. It was for my dad's works. But that was the first time I saw a computer in the house that wasn't on TV somewhere. And then at school, one of the teachers had a Commodore 64, and that was pretty cool. And his son was in the Air Force, so he had all these hacked games that all the people in the Navy were swapping around at the time, apparently through BBSs. And then around 85 or 86, I moved to a new house, and the neighbor had a Commodore 64, and that's really when I fell in love with the Commodore 64. And it was more because of the music than the games, because I would sit and watch him play, but it was always the title screen music that I was like, wow, this is what should be on the radio. So I eventually got my own off of what was known as the the Penny Saver. I don't know if you guys have that out where you guys grew up, but it was a little half page but thick periodical of just garage sale type stuff that you could call people. It was like Craigslist on paper. And so I got a Commodore 64 back in 85 or 86. And then I went to summer school in 87. And that's when I really got my first exposure to the Apple II. And I was really surprised at how vibrant the colors were versus the Commodore 64. And I didn't even know until recently being 2005, that there were only 6 colors with exception of the double high res mode. But people did a lot with the high-res mode, and I didn't even know about the whole high-bit, low-bit color battle, which I learned very quickly about when I started doing the Lawless Legends graphics. But the Apple II, I played Oregon Trail. That was just such a fantastic game. Even as education, the software, you didn't even notice that you were learning something, because it was so much fun.
Learning.
So that was kind of the beginning of my computer career. And it was great to grow up in the golden age of computers because you saw all those advances from the monochrome to CGA, which is awful, but it was better than monochrome. Going to EGA, which you thought, wow, look at all the colors. What else do you need? And then my head exploded when I saw the early Amigas in '85 and seeing like more than 256 colors. And I think we all remember the parrot picture that they always demoed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Battle Chess, when that came out, was mind-blowing. And then it just kept going like that. But where today, pixels, polygons, there's so many of them now, it's really hard to see the difference. But in the 80s, you saw everything as it advanced. It was such a huge leap forward for like 10, 15 years into the mid-90s, and that kind of got boring.
I concur. So it sounds like your path to electronic music was kind of set pretty early on. How did you go from a youth playing with computers to actually making electronic music?
Well, I had ever since I played or watched my buddy Obi play Adventure Construction Set, Stuart Smith's Adventure Construction Set, which came out for the Apple II first. The title music for that changed my life. And it's still to me, the most epic title music because it goes through lots of different sections of the song, different movements or whatever. But it's just, if you get a chance, the Apple II version is, you get the idea of what he is doing. But if you listen to the Commodore 64 version, you get the full impact. But it changed my life, and that's what made me want to get into computers, and that's what had me start listening to chip music, or video game music, as they called it back then. Because I would get up before school. I remember, like 7th grade through high school almost. I would boot up in the morning after I got out of the shower and I was getting dressed. I'd boot up a game just to listen to the title music that would loop of different games. That was like the early iPod. One song per disc.
I confess I used to do that too, actually. With some Apple II and especially the 2GS games, a lot of them had amazing title screen music. And I would just...
Did you have the Mockingbird or just straight up Apple II?
No, just out of the Apple II. I don't remember. There was a couple of 8-bit games that I was always really impressed with. I'm struggling to remember. I think California Games had really great music straight out of the Apple II speaker. But getting into the GS stuff, especially, I used to just boot up games and leave them on the title screen while I did other things.
Yeah, it's funny. The GS and the Amiga really were the precursors to a lot of modern music techniques of sampling that became really popular in the mid to late 90s. They were doing it in the mid to late 80s.
So then how did you form 8-Bit Weapon?
So what happened was I begged my dad for a synthesizer for a number of years, but he was a very conservative businessman, and he said, you need to become, basically some kind of professional out in the world. Music's great as a hobby, but you're never going to go anywhere. You're not going to make money at it either, especially. So I ended up making a deal with him in my senior year where I said, look, you could give me several hundreds of dollars to go to prom, or I could take that money and get a keyboard. And so I got a keyboard. So that was in 93. I got my first keyboard. And it had MIDI, so I got it hooked up to my computer. So I'd been doing electronic music from 93 to 98. And in 98, the internet was already in full swing. First time I was on the internet was in 1995. And the first thing I did on the internet was look up pictures of Devo.
Well, who didn't, of course.
Yeah.
So in 98, I discovered emulators and specifically SID players, which blew my mind. It's like, of course, why not just play the music and not have to load up the game? That's genius.
Yeah.
So I started listening to a lot of SIDs, and back then the big technology that is now a flop, kind of like the Betamax, was mini disc recorders and players.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember those.
So I invested in a mini disc recorder and player, and I started recording SID tunes to mini discs so I could listen to it in my car through a cassette converter jack. You know what I mean? You put the cassette in, it's got the...
Yeah.
So I did that, and then I discovered, because I have have you guys heard of the... oh, actually, this might make sense to you. It's great to talk to other nerds. So the Bob Jans, or Yanis, or whatever you want to say, after he created the SID chip and left, he eventually created the chip that's used in the 2GS.
Mm-hmm.
Are you guys aware of that?
Yes.
Yeah, the Ensoniq, yeah.
Yeah. So somewhere before or after that, when he made the Mirage sampler. So I own 2 Mirage samplers. That was the first sampler I bought. So I went into Best Buy to look at their video games and software, and they had something called Sonic Foundry Acid, where it came with royalty-free loops. And I only cared about the loops. I couldn't care less about the software. I just wanted drum loops that I could record into my Ensoniq Mirage. So I bought it for like $20, and it had all these great drum loops. I didn't care about the music loops because then I'd have to figure out how to pitch it and all that, and that would be a nightmare. So I would just start experimenting with the software because I got it, and it's like, this is amazing. I can drop my SID files into Acid and then beat match up drum loops and make remixes of my favorite SID tunes. This is amazing. So that's how the first 8-Bit Weapon album, Confidential, came out. It's like a dozen or 18 or so Commodore 64 songs that I added mostly drums to because they were pretty well fleshed. But if I figured out what key it was in, I could add a bass line or something if it needed it. So that's originally how 8-Bit Weapon was born, because I did this album of remixes and I needed to give it a title separate from my original music act, which I just went under Seth, which is very original. But people were way more interested in 8-Bit Weapon than Seth. So that's when the course changed in my music. So around 2000, I think in 98 or 99, Electron out of Sweden had created the SID station, which is a MIDI controllable SID chip in a box. So I bought that in 2000, and I started writing my own original music using that, combining synthesizer sounds as a hybrid. And so around 2004, I started writing music as a band with other people. And then 2005, we released the first all original 8-Bit Weapon music, which was a hybrid of Game Boy, Commodore 64, drum machines, and other stuff. It was another kind of soup of 8-bit instruments. And that's kind of the format that we've had since then, because we've since added the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System. We have a cartridge that has a MIDI cable coming out of it that lets you control all 5 sound channels of the NES. We now have, as of 4 years ago, a MIDI controllable Atari 400 or 800 XL. And it just all keeps adding. And of course, the latest, greatest 8-bit weapon, or 1-bit weapon, look at it, is the Apple II, which you would think would be one of the earliest because it's been around the longest. And it's the uncontested winner of the 8-bit computer wars for the most part. I mean, you could argue, yeah, IBM was there, but they're a different animal altogether. But and Apple is, everybody owns something of Apple at this point for the most part.
I think that's true.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah, it's one of the things we like to brag about on the show is that Apple is the only one that survived.
Yeah.
So how did you get involved with Michelle? Has she been part of 8-Bit Weapon since the beginning?
No. So around the end of December 5th, 2004, I had started a new location for Club Microwave, which was the first U.S. chip music club. And we'd have other synth pop acts, because I just love synthesizer music in general. But for the most part, it was chip music or what was known as micro music related acts. So Michelle and her sister and her buddy had shown up that night to watch me play. And actually, she told me later that she left before we played because the band that was on before me was so bad they left. But at least we made eye contact that night. And so about a week later, I saw, and she actually didn't even have a picture of herself on her profile. But being the nerd that I am, seeing a female actually like my band, I had to check out her profile. Checked out her profile, and it said a lot of cool things. She liked classic rock or whatever and all this stuff. But at the bottom of the thing she liked, she said Commodore 64 music. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. You never see that. So I sent her an email that skipped all the normal pleasantries of like, hey, how's it going? I checked out your profile. You know, I see you like blah, blah, blah. I went straight for the Commodore 64 music. And I said, do you really like Commodore 64 music? And I think that might have been the body of my whole. It might have been hi, and then do you really like Commodore 64 music? I think that might have been it. Probably get up. And she responded, she said, yeah, you know, her older brother actually had a Commodore 64, and when he upgraded to Amiga, she inherited it. So that got the whole ball rolling and talking. And then a week later, I was making her a spaghetti dinner at my place. So then about 2006, rewind. So by February of 2005, our first Valentine's Day, I gave her a Game Boy with LSDJ in it, which is the tracking music sequencer for Game Boy. And part of the Valentine's gift was I promised that I would show her how to use it. But I was in the middle of recording the first 8-Bit Weapon album, original music album. And that took up every weekend for like a year, it seems like, at least. And so I didn't teach her. So she actually taught everything she knows to herself on the Game Boy. And in fact, she knows way more than I do still. And her knowledge that she shared with me eventually led to the creation of the Bits with Byte album, because I was kind of getting tired of using Game Boy because I thought that I had explored it thoroughly. But she eventually joined 8-Bit Weapon after being 2006 and together ever since.
So it looks like, in just a little callback here, you'd mentioned the first thing you looked at on your computer was pictures of Devo, that she actually got to work with Mark Mothersbaugh. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a great story. So I want to say it was something along the lines of 2 weeks after she posted her first couple of songs on MySpace, she got contacted by a guy that was working with Mark Mothersbaugh on what is now Vaporware, called Butt Pong. And he said, Mark Mothersbaugh needs someone to convert his music to 8-bit and also create some sound effects.
Oh, wow.
And we couldn't believe it. Like, she showed me the email, and she's like, is this real or what? And I said, well, there's only one way to find out. And so sure enough, I think a week later, she's sitting in Mark Mothersbaugh's office talking to him about the project. And he had a stack of Game Boys with the Game Boy camera, because there's actually a secret 16-step sequencer for the Game Boy that you can do little loops with or whatever. And he had become a fan of her music. And yeah, it was quite the experience. Of course, I was extremely jealous. But I mean, what an opportunity. And so Mark Mothersbaugh would send her songs that the world had never heard before. And we are still the only people that have heard it.
Oh, wow.
We'd convert it. He'd send either a WAV or an MP3, and then he'd send the MIDI along with it to send to, the Commodore or the NES or whatever to convert, and then she'd send it back. So it was a pretty awesome experience for her. And it was a lot of fun listening to about 16 to 20 fart noises she created with the conversation board using the Pong paddle. So the Pong paddle would let you control the resonance. So you'd go, it's pretty funny.
And so then is that what led you to like working with, I mean, it looks like you've remixed like Erasure, Kraftwerk, Information Society, a lot of kind of big electronica bands.
Yeah. What's funny is, with the exception of one artist, and I still have him on my bucket list specifically, we've worked with most of the electronic artists that have inspired us. Kraftwerk, we were doing a compilation. A friend of ours at the time, his brother was the vice president or president of Astralworks Records, which I don't know if they're still around today, but was a big deal for the latter half of the 90s into the 2000s through as recent as 2010 or so. But so he got to go to Kraftwerk concert with his brother, because Kraftwerk was on the Astralworks label for their Tour de France 2003 album. And he gave Ralph Hooter, one of the two founders, and Florian, they were both there, he gave them a Game Boy with LSDJ, kind of like what I did with Michelle on Valentine's Day. But they didn't join his band a couple years ago. But they were really intrigued by this concept because it's kind of full circle. They did home computer or computer world with all the computer themed music. And here is a handheld computer essentially generating music, all self-encapsulated. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so he told them that him and his friends were doing a tribute album of their music, and they said, yes, we want to be directly involved. And they handpicked all the artists on the compilation. So they picked our song from a large list of offerings from people in the chip music community. So it was a real honor. And what's kind of cool and not cool at the same time is other artists got direct feedback if Kraftwerk wanted them to fix or change something, because people got one or two notes wrong here or there or something incorrect, and Kraftwerk would send through their handlers notes to the artist saying, fix this, which would be awesome, but we did nothing wrong, so we didn't get that. Nice. So it's a double-edged sword there, but yeah, it was really cool that Kraftwerk, we have a direct link to Kraftwerk, and they've heard our music and they picked our version. Information Society turned out became fans of ours, and we actually got to open for them once at the Viper Room in Hollywood, and that was just an amazing opportunity. And we still keep in touch with two of the three of the guys. And it's just, I remember in the 80s seeing Information Society on TV, and I became a bigger fan in the mid 90s, late 90s actually, where I just started collecting all their singles, and I just ate up all the materials they had of remixes. And I never thought in a million years I'd be going to Paul Robb's birthday party. He's the main songwriter of the band. And that was just like, Michelle and I were like, is this happening? Are we actually at this guy's party? And we talked to him for a while. We got to ask him questions because he got to work with one of the guys from Kraftwerk on one of their earlier albums. And we still keep in touch with him. And he's had us do 2 remixes now. And then just all kinds of stuff. I don't know. It's pretty crazy. All the things that music has brought us and brought us to. I mean, we've traveled through Europe thanks to music and all kinds of stuff. And
that's amazing.
And the Smithsonian, which is to me just the biggest achievement you could hope for, is to have your music on display with your little card explaining the music and who you are in the Smithsonian Museum of American Art.
Yeah, so is that part of the Art of Video Games display, the exhibit?
That is correct. Yeah, when you go into the exhibit, which is now over, unfortunately, you hear a cycle of 3 8-Bit Weapons songs and 2 of Michelle's solo computer songs. And there's a little plaque at the entrance explaining what you're hearing and who you're hearing. And then also we were allowed to name one of the songs the Art of Video Games Anthem.
So how did that come about?
So a number of things came together with that. We've been longtime friends with Chris Melosinos, who comes from Sun Microsystems. And I met him at the Classic Gaming Expo in, I think, 2005. And we had remained friends since, and he had invited me onto his show several times, but I just wasn't able to get up there and onto his show like I had wanted to before it was over, and he moved out to the DC area. But we always kept in touch. We always bumped into each other because we'd always play at E3, and we'd usually see him there or at some other event related to video games, like what's it called? The Game Developers Conference up in the Bay Area. So he sent me an email saying, I can't tell you in writing, but give me a call. So I'm like, ooh, this is going to be juicy. And sure enough, it was. He basically outlined what the art of video games was going to be, when it was going to be, and what it means for the gaming community, because it really legitimizes and defeats all parental arguments that video games are a waste of your life. So any parent that says don't go to video games, or you're playing video games, you're wasting your life and you should be doing other things, video games are a valid art form. It's official. And that includes game art, pixel art, music, all of it. Everything comes with it, because you're talking about interactive fiction, interactive movies. And it's one of the most sophisticated forms of art out there, because you can't interact with movies like you can with the video game, especially when you're playing adventure games like the old Sierra style, where you are the character and you are making the choices. You watch it unfold because of your actions. So it was just an amazing idea. And then he said, so we're doing this, and they used our Bard's Tale 3 for the video, for the display, and he wanted to use our actual Commodore 64 for the exhibit. So when you went to the exhibit and you saw the Commodore 64 in that display, it was our Commodore 64.
Nice.
That's cool.
So now we have it frozen in carbonite, safekeeping. But then after that, at the E3 in 2011, a couple of people from the Smithsonian were meeting with Chris, and he sent them over to where we were performing. They watched us perform live, and they're like, how can we get you guys to perform at the Smithsonian? And we're like, you just did. We're doing it. So we had to basically submit some information to them, and the Smithsonian had to review it and approve it, but after that, like 4 month wait, they're like, yes, we'd love to have you come out and perform. So that was just really amazing that we were there for the opening weekend, and there was lines going around the block to get in, and we played out in the courtyard, which was just beautiful courtyard in the center of the Smithsonian American Museum. And that performance too was a huge highlight. So, and actually, if you go on our Facebook page, is back to 2012 March, you'll see a picture that we took of the audience at the end of the show, where everybody was standing up and had their hands up. It was just a great picture. I'd love to get it framed and put on the wall. It's just one of those parts of your life that is so amazing that you're kind of depressed afterwards, because you're like, how do you top that?
Yeah. Wow, that is fantastic. So for this,
I guess you top it by releasing the world's first Apple II album.
Yeah, well, there you go, full circle. So with with the development of that album, you've built up all this infrastructure now for making Apple II music. So is there going to be more Apple II music in 8-Bit Weapons future?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Michelle had released in her software single an all Apple II version that was not MIDI. And so, yeah, we plan to incorporate more Apple II sounds into the general albums in the future. We're working on another all Commodore 64 album, currently, a sequel to our disassembly language, which is ambient music for deprogramming. So that was actually as albums go for us, our biggest success to date, which I thought was going to be fun for really big fans and boring to everybody else, but apparently is easily the most successful album we've ever released. So after that album came out, most people want us to go into volume 2, but by that point I had learned that there was no Apple II albums, so I had to do that and be the first. So now that that's it's back to the Commodore. But yeah, there'll be more Apple in the future, guaranteed.
Great.
Especially, the thing I love the most about the DMS synthesizer is that almost that DX7 style bass sound that comes out of it. It's just super 80s awesomeness.
Yeah. So about the DMS software, you actually sell that. Is that right?
Yeah. So you can buy a disk image because most people have ADT Pro these days anyway. But if you don't, you can buy the diskette, which is just a little bit more. And we'll send you a floppy disk. But what we're going to do now is we're actually going to take that down and have Charles. We're going to do it all through him. He's going to do the order fulfillment, and so they'll order the DMS MIDI box and get a disc that's 2 sides with the drummer on one side and the synthesizer on the other. So you've got everything you need to make your Apple II album. So we're really close to turning that on and letting people buy that, because that's really the way to do it. And most people would rather use the MIDI version,
Sure. Yeah. So, and as far as like buying your music or seeing you, do you guys still perform live?
Yeah. We haven't performed live recently. We've just been busy with lots of studio projects and of course the day job scenario. So, but we plan to get back out into the world and performing live sometime next year would be ideal. So, but yeah, we still get offers to play gigs. Just depends on our schedule month to month. It just hasn't lined up yet.
So where can we go buy Class Apples and all your other music while we're waiting for you to appear live?
Well, there's a number of places. You can go to, of course, iTunes. That's the place you want to listen to your Apple music on your Apple product through the Apple retail.
Apple.
That's the most Apple you can get to maximize Apple pleasure. Then after that, you can, of course, go to Amazon Music to buy the MP3s. You can also stream through Spotify and Amazon Unlimited. And if you like the DIY vibe and direct support, you go to Bandcamp, 8bitweapon.bandcamp.com. And that's where most of our albums actually get released first. Actually, all our albums get released there first for about a month. And then a month after that, it goes to Spotify and all the other retailers online. And actually, you can get a subscription to our music for $25 a year. You get all of our entire back catalog, which is like 15 albums or something, hours of music, and every release for the following year. We had 3 releases this year. That's all included. So you get all the back catalog, which is 15 albums or whatever. And if we release 2 or 3 albums next year, you get those as well. And then if you don't want to renew, you just cancel at any time. But that's a great way to show your support for independent music and help pay for all of the unique software and hardware we have to buy to stay innovative. And besides the fact that all this old equipment breaks, like our station just broke. So we had to send it to a buddy up north to see if he can fix it. But if they couldn't fix it, we'd have to go and buy some sort of MIDI interface for the SID sounds. So that's a never-ending battle, is keeping all these machines alive, and if they die, replacing them. And because people are getting savvy to it now that chip music, which blows my mind, is somewhat well known in general, in the general consciousness of people. It's harder to buy Game Boys or Commodore 64s for $10. Mm-hmm. Those days are long gone. So
yeah,
the guys, people stream music, and that's great because the artists still get some monetary support that way. But you basically have to have 1 million plays to make $1,000.
Mm-hmm. Well, plus the components, some of these, like the SID chip in particular, they obviously don't make that anymore. And, so as those die, people are having to cannibalize Commodore 64s to get more of them.
You have to, it's kind of sad because you have to buy a beautiful machine to rip its heart out.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll definitely have all those links in the show notes for people to buy and subscribe to 8-Bit Weapon. Mike, do you have any last questions?
No, I just wanted to say, Seth, thank you very much for joining us. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure. And just a little note about Lawless Legends: we are in the play testing beta phase. We've got virtually 95% of everything working that we want to work. We've got 5 people play testing it. We're getting lots of great feedback. We're hoping to have it out before the end of the year.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, we'll probably have the whole crew back on to talk about that at lunchtime.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
All right, guys. Take care.
Thanks.
Sorry.
No, listen, that is future us's problem. I'm not gonna let you take away my buzz right now. Okay, present us is only worried about you quitting your nobody told you about job.
When are you gonna let that go?
When you go into business with me?
Wait, I'm sorry, going to what with you? Wait, what?
Work with me on this. We work so well together. Okay, the photographic analysis algorithm is just one of many in a long list of amazing tech that you and I have collaborated on. Think about all the good we could do, all the cool stuff we could do, all the cool things we could make. Please don't say no.
Yes.
Oh, thank God, good, because I already filed the paperwork.
Oh man, this is so cool. We like Woz and Jobs, like back in '76.
Wait, who's Woz and who's Jobs? Shotgun Jobs.
Well, thank you, Seth, for coming on. That was fantastic. Mike, why don't we roll into some news?
Sounds good to me. Hit the music.
It may be old, but there's still news. Apple II news.
All right, so our first couple of items, we've got an Alex Lucchesi theme, one of our favorite Australians, and he's got a couple of items that came across his site last month, and I don't think they've been mentioned yet, so I threw them in here. The first one is he's put up a collection of all of the software that supports the 4-play joystick card. So, of course, this is a 2GS card that lets you play with 4 joysticks. Does it work in the 8-bit Apples too? I'm actually not sure.
I believe it does, yes.
Okay, cool. So, people have been modifying existing games and in some cases writing new games to support this thing. And, of course, the classic example being Bomberman GS, which was modified to support it. We did a tournament of that at K-Fest in 2016, which was awesome. And so anyway, he was observing that there's no list anywhere of all the software that supports that card. So that is now up on his site, and we will link to it.
Yeah, I'm reading on his website that the 4-play card plugs into any Apple II model that contains physical slots. So sorry, Apple IIc people.
Yes, that's often the epilogue to these stories. Sorry, Apple IIc. But we all know it's the prettiest, so that counts for something.
That's true.
All right, so this next item is a really interesting one, and I'm super glad that he posted this. So the item's called Checkpoint, and it's a kind of a long story, which he has a nice blog post about here. But essentially, he was browsing eBay, and he found this old piece of this collection of hardware and software that someone had put together for educational purposes. That is for controlling a remote control car using the Apple II.
Oh, okay.
And it's a neat idea, and the whole package, I guess, went for a bunch of money. So he didn't actually buy it, but he got inspired to figure out how it worked and maybe recreate it. So he got the seller of the eBay auction to send him pictures of the interface card and front and back, and he traced the circuits and figured out how it was working. And the software was on cassette only. And
wow.
And amazingly, the fine folks at Brutal Deluxe managed to find this cassette. They didn't have it in their massive cassette collection at the time, but it did eventually turn up. So he analyzed that software to figure out how that was working, and so effectively recreated this whole system. And so he built this thing to where he found some old RC cars that he, modified, and to work with this system, it's, hooks into the car with relays, and it's all very cool and fun. And then when he was all done with it, decided, well, this is neat, but it's not enough. So I'm going to make a game out of this. So this is where the details get a little thin, because the timing of this, he was getting it ready for one of the Australian shows. K-Fest or Wazfest. I don't even want to say because I'm going to get it wrong. But one of the
gets worse and worse, I think.
Yeah, one of the Australian Apple II shows, he wanted to demo it there, and so yeah, he had. So he's put together this game, and there's not a lot of details on how it works, but it involves playing with the RC car in the room with some sort of connection to software on the Apple II, keeping score or whatever. So I'm calling it an augmented reality-ish game for the Apple II, and it's very cool. He says he's promised a video in the blog post of this in action, so hopefully that will surface, and if and when it does, we will certainly talk about it here.
Remember that die-cast Apple II Porsche 935 model that we talked about a while ago?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I want to see this integrated into one of those. That would be cool.
That would be very cool indeed. Maybe version 2.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah. All right. So the next item was one sent in to us by a listener. Thanks for that. We always appreciate interesting links. And this one is called A2OS and it is a new multitasking operating system project for the Apple II. So we will link to a forum discussion about this on 6502.org. And which is, a general purpose 6502 group, not necessarily Apple II. But we will also link to the GitHub repo of the code for this thing. It's cooperative multitasking, since it's designed to run on an Apple IIe, which of course has no interrupts out of the box, so there's really no way to do preemptive multitasking. But it looks like a pretty cool thing. There's a call for assistants and testers to help with it. It looks like it's pretty complete. They're just looking for testing of some of the more obscure hardware cards and some of that kind of thing. But, it sort of reminds me a bit of like Kontiki or one of those types of things. So if you're interested in playing with, brand new operating systems in kind of the modern mold for your Apple II, this looks like a great thing to play with.
Yeah, it says that this A2OS is designed to work on any stock 128K Apple IIe with no additional hardware. There's no VBL signal on the 2E, so there's no preemptive multitasking available, but I guess they're attempting to use a mouse card, which does have the VBL IRQ, and they're looking to integrate that. That's kind of the latest update. They're also looking for testers and people who want to play with sort of, beta software and give them feedback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we'll link to that, and people should check it out if they like that sort of thing. So the last item in this group here is about Kansas Fest. So the last couple of years, we've been videotaping the entries for Hackfest, which is the kind of competition that takes place within Kansas Fest. People spend the whole week building software or sometimes hardware project. There's not really much for rules besides it has to be done entirely at the show. You can't prepare anything ahead of time. And we get everything from games to wacky hacks to hardware toys to everything in between. And in any case, we've been videotaping so everybody can see what people are doing. And traditionally, we've posted those videos on the Kansas Fest YouTube page. This year, we had technical problems with the camera setup. The camera, the SD card in the camera that was recording all the video, it refused to load on my laptop, and so we had to use someone else's laptop. And there was a big panic because all this was happening seconds before we were supposed to show these videos to a room full of people. And so we managed to get the videos to show, but then I never got them dumped to my machine, and I'm typically the one who then edits and uploads them to the YouTube channel. So it took a long time to sort all that out because then the SD card went home with Jason Scott, who owned the camera, and it took forever to figure out what happened to them and get them posted somewhere. So that finally did happen. There was some miscommunications involved as well, but Jason Scott has generously created an entry over on archive.org for these videos, and there's a little note in there explaining what they all are. So it's a bit of a different format than usual, but, and, 3 months late, but at least they are up somewhere. So, those of you who've been asking to see these videos, here they finally are for 2017.
Awesome.
Next year, heads up for anyone planning to enter Hackfest next year for Kansas Fest 2018, the judging will be in the morning because judging in the afternoon, it's just too tight. We can't get the videos collected and edited and set up the presentation in time for the big presentation at the end there. So.
Aww.
Fair warning, since I'm sure it will be me who gets roped into running this thing again. I'm telling you now, judging will be much, much earlier because I would like to enjoy my Saturday afternoon.
Ken Gagney and I think maybe Peter as well have both talked about on the show in the past how rewarding and fulfilling it is to be part of the K-Fest committee and running things kind of behind the scenes. And on the other hand, it really kind of eats into just sort of relaxing and enjoying the show. So that's completely understandable.
Yeah. Yeah, and these preparations are also on top of the vendor fair. So, year before last, when I was trying to also sell my 2C ROMs at the vendor fair while editing these videos and preparing the presentation frantically an hour before the final session, that was not a good time. But
no.
We're iterating on this. The video recording is a new addition to the process, so we're getting better at it.
And remember that Kansas Fest is actually supposed to be about fun and relaxing with other Apple II people. So.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so this next item is yours. Speaking of augmented reality, I guess?
Yeah, so, with the introduction of the iPhone X and iPhone 8 and new AR-Kit capabilities that Apple is sort of pushing these days, this is somebody sent me a link to an AR-Kit program, I guess, or app on for your iOS device called Homebrew Club by someone named Jifu Zhang. I hope I pronounced that properly. And it basically allows you to place a bunch of different classic Apple II and Apple III and Apple I and other less important vintage computers on your desk or wherever else you want to put it in your little AR world there. It's available on the iTunes Store for $2.99. So and I'm not sure that these don't do anything other than, oh, look, there's an Apple on my AR desk, but I don't know. I think it's kind of cool.
It is. Yeah. If anyone hasn't played with augmented reality stuff, it is extremely cool. When it's well done, it's a pretty freaky and fun effect. Look forward to new, augmented reality stuff coming out for iOS now that they've made that easy.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so next up we got TechCrunch talking about Apple's IPO. What's the scoop here, Mike?
Yeah, so this PDF obviously has been floating around for many years. The original IPO documentation, I think it's the prospectus and things like that. But this is the first time I've actually seen a financial expert kind of sit down, somebody who I guess works on Wall Street and posts on TechCrunch, sit down and analyze what Apple's IPO looked like and what their company, what they were hoping to gain from all of this. And it is interesting. He talks about the stock split, and at least back in 1980, Steve Jobs was the main stockholder. He had 15% of shares in Apple in 1980, and Mike Markkula had 14%, and Woz had 7.8%, and everybody else was kind of below that. So yeah, just sort of a fascinating look if you were kind of interested in the history of Apple that isn't necessarily based on the specific computers that they were selling.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, it's it looks like an interesting read. I confess I haven't read it yet, but it's sort of IPOs are sort of old hat now because, the tech boom of the late 90s and has continued to this day, and IPOs are sort of a standard thing now. Everyone expects everyone to get rich and whatever. But I think back in the early 80s, IPOs were still kind of a more cerebral kind of Wall Street thing that nobody paid much attention to, and it wasn't such a crazy event where secretaries become billionaires overnight or whatever like it is today. So Apple was kind of an early example of that, I feel like. I remember there's a famous photo going around, I haven't seen it in a while, but of a secretary who had a fancy car, and the vanity license plate was THXAAPL. Thanks, Apple, using their stock symbol.
Nice.
So I always thought that was really clever.
Yeah. So this is a quick and easy read. And if you're interested in finances, take a look.
Cool. Well, there's a book coming out called Breakout, How the Apple II Started the PC Gaming Revolution. And I can't think about this book now without thinking of a funny tweet from 4am a couple of weeks ago. I guess there's another book that's also claiming that Atari or someone else started the computer gaming revolution. A lot of people are claiming to start revolutions these days. It's kind of the thing. But anyway,
I just go around claiming that I start various revolutions, over my lunch hour. So
yeah, it puts the burden of proof on people, on
That's
other
right.
people to prove otherwise. Yeah. Yeah. So, in any case, Breakout is making such a claim for the Apple II, which of course we heartily endorse and support. And so we got two good stories here. First is on Carmen Sandiego.
Yeah, so the first one is on Kotaku, and it goes into the history, like you said, of Carmen Sandiego, and talks to the programmer at Broderbund. That always confuses me. And he talks a little bit about that. And of course, Kotaku does a nice little write up, as they do on a lot of their game stuff. So that's fun to read. And they also had a nice write-up in the book about how Richard Garriot got started. And of course, everybody, in the Apple II community kind of, I think, knows about how, he programmed all these D&D games in BASIC and went around and sold a Calibeth on his own, and to software stores in plastic baggies, and how those things are now worth thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on eBay. But I think mostly these articles serve as kind of a nice sales tool for the book itself, because, I'll be honest, I wasn't sure that I needed like another Apple II history book right now, but after reading this, I'm a lot more interested, and I'm going to spend the money, I think, at least to get the Kindle version. What about you?
Yeah, I think I'll be picking this up. Same as you. I was just sort of like, oh, it looks like someone just capitalizing on, retro computing. It's popular now or whatever, but, just looking at some of the blurbs from it, it's actually more interesting than I would have thought. So, which I guess is the point of the blurbs, and it has clearly worked on us. So
yes, we're easily influenced.
Yes, sales plus equals 2, I guess. But
I did find it funny that Kevin Savage tweeted out this photo of that book. Plus, there's another book called Breakout, How the Atari 8-bit Computers Defined a Generation. Is published basically coincidentally with the same title. And
yes.
I think David Craddock, the author of the Apple version, went, yep, this is coincidence, and I had no idea, but awesome.
Yeah. Sorry, that was the tweet I was thinking of, Kevin Savitz. I mistakenly attributed that to 4am. Sorry, Mr. Savitz.
I'm sure we don't really know who 4am is, so it could be Kevin.
Yeah. Well, they're both the two funniest people in my Twitter stream. I know that. So I get them confused all the time. All right, so moving right along. So if I wanted a copy of Time Zone for the Apple II, Akihabara in Japan is not the place I would think to go.
Yeah, well, Akihabara is a district, I guess, in Tokyo, because Tokyo is big on like districts of stuff where you can do weird niche things. And this is the Akihabara Tokyo district, which houses the world's densest cluster of nerd-related storefronts, which just makes me like I'm drooling. I got to go there.
Yeah,
but
it's an amazing place. There's a whole store that just sells zip ties, and another one that just sells heat shrink tubing. It's crazy.
But Chris Kohler at Kotaku went through a few of these and found some weird, cool rarities and high price tags. And one of the things that he stumbled across was a copy of Time Zone, which is one of those Apple II games that, it's on Asimov and all the repositories as disk images that you can download. And I think Ivan actually did a Kansas Fest presentation a few years back on how to make them, put them all in one disk image or something like that to minimize the disk flipping, because it's 12 double-sided floppy disks that you play through on this. It's massive. I just thought it was kind of funny that here in the middle of Japan is a copy of this thing, and it looks like they have a few other rarities like the early Sierra Online titles, Mystery House, and things like that. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, the Apple II did have a presence out there, so I guess we shouldn't be too shocked that there's some of that stuff kicking around. It was one of the few markets where the 2 Plus was localized. Was it the J Plus they called it?
Yep.
It had a sort of some form of readable kanji, I guess, on the Apple II Plus. Kind of a neat machine that we don't see a lot of here in North America, but yeah, great to see that stuff across the ocean.
Looks like some of the prices, though, are just as much as you'll find them on eBay for. The Mystery House and things like that were all selling for around $950.
$950?
Yeah.
Not yen? That sounds like a lot of dollars for Mystery House.
100,000 yen.
Wow. Huh.
Right.
That's, yeah, I guess, is it like unopened in box or something?
It doesn't look like they were unopened. I mean, they've been re-shrink wrapped, but they're all pretty worn. So.
Wow. Okay. Those are high prices. Wow. Okay. Well, I'm clearly in the wrong line of work here. I should be hoarding copies of Mystery House and selling them in Japan. All right. Moving right along. As many of our listeners know, due to my shameless self-promotion, I created a ROM replacement for your Apple IIc Plus that fixes the beep sound to make it sound more like the Apple II. Yeah. And also defaults it to 1 megahertz instead of the useful in 1987 and annoying in 2017, 4 megahertz. And so over here on ComSys Apple II, someone has posted a nice little code blurb that kind of is a universal accelerator controller program. It's only a handful of bytes. It's really cute, so you can put it as like a boot thing on a floppy or whatever. And it will default your 2C Plus to 1 megahertz, presumably using the API for controlling the accelerator that's in the CGGA chip on the 2C Plus. But the nice thing about this is it also works on other accelerators. So it works on the 2GS, it works on the fast chip from the Mad Bulgarian over there at A2 Heaven, and various other things. So yeah, it's a nice little blob of hex that could be very useful.
Yep, and it looks like it's still morphing and growing. And as people think of more accelerators to try it on, they're adding and modifying the code to make sure it works on everything.
Yeah, this is great. This would be great. Like if you're writing a game, just drop this at the top of your game, and
neat.
Just set it to 1 megahertz. Whatever you're running on, and your game will work without people having to mess with their hardware. So, yeah, I love that. It's called NormFast. I don't think we mentioned that.
No.
We will link to that thread. And if you have a weird edge case accelerator, maybe you have a Transwarp 2 or one that nobody else has, then dig this out and add to it.
Yep.
All right, so you mentioned High Sierra and compatibility issues at the top of the show. What's going on there, Mike?
Yeah, so Ewan Wenup, the prolific Apple IIgs programmer, he's written a ton of awesome utilities for your 2GS. He wrote one called Safe2 a while back. It's an FTP. It's an FTP client, and if you're running a server on your your Mac, he made a post over at ComSys Apple II letting everyone know that Apple had removed the inbuilt FTP server from their operating system. So you'll need to go and I guess either install your own or you can download the FTP server app from the iTunes store. It's just no longer there by default.
It always makes me a little sad when Apple randomly removes nice, useful little things like that from the OS. I mean, that can't have taken up more than 20 or 30K in the distribution. Like, why would they just remove that? I don't know.
Right. It's a weird decision to make, but I guess it's something they don't have to support anymore.
Yeah, I guess so. Oh, Apple. All right. So it looks like CiderPress has been updated, yeah?
Yep, 4.0.2. It's looks like some bug fixes and a few improvements to the handling of packed super high-res images. Not a whole lot, I think, of brand new or fancy stuff that you're going to see in the front end. But if you are a fan of CiderPress, then 4.0.2 has been updated, and the new lib utility, the image management portion of it, that's been updated as well with some fixes.
Cool. Still no Mac version.
Nope.
No, I mean, it is a great tool. It is a great tool. And I do run it on my Mac under Wine Bottler, which does work just fine. But it's a little fussy to set up, but in a pinch. For most of my development, I still use Apple Commander just because it's command line and it's trivial to use. But for if I have a bunch of organizing or something I have to do on a bunch of disk images, then Ciderpress is definitely still the best way to do it.
Right.
All right, so this next item is a web-based 6502 assembler, and it's interesting that you linked to this, Mike, because I have actually used this quite a bit myself for various 6502 projects. It's a nice little platform-agnostic assembler. You can just type a blob of source code into one side of the window, and it assembles it in the other and shows you the object code. It's useful for all kinds of stuff, and it'll go the other way as well. You can post object code, and it'll disassemble it for you. So if you just needed to quickly look up some opcodes or something in a pinch, this thing is pretty handy.
Yeah, this one's been around on the web forever, since 2005. Yeah, and I know that this is not the only one available. It's just one that I happened to stumble across. And, we were talking about Normfast, and the code is being posted directly to ComSys Apple II. And this is a kind of a quick and easy way to run the code right there. So
Yeah, and actually when I was working on Veronica, my homemade 8-bit computer, I actually used this exact web-based assembler to generate some of the ROM code. It was just I needed to, paste the hex directly into the EEPROM tool that was burning the ROMs, and it was just easy to copy paste out of this tool. Write my source code, paste the source code in there, and then copy the object code into the ROM. And it was kind of before I had a full, build pipeline up and running for that system, it was a good workaround to get the actual compiled code in. So yeah, it's a nice little thing.
Now you can run your own 6502 code on the very assembler that Quinn used on Veronica.
Yeah, it's actually got a little debugger in it too. You can actually step through code, which again, in a pinch, is kind of neat, kind of handy.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm.
All right, so now for something completely different. Friend of the show, Antoine Vigneault, has been collecting all of the adult-themed Apple II software for both the 8-bits and the 2GS. So if you want a list of that, now there is one.
Yep, all the naughty 8-bit Apple II software is now in one place, and you can even get at the very bottom of the list. There's one simply called x.zip, and it's all compressed into one little file for you. And if you do download this, we don't need to hear about it.
Yes, I will say there's more of it than I realized.
Right?
People were busy back in the day writing this stuff. Oh gosh.
All right.
Let's see. Looks like a new Call Apple is out.
Yeah, so the latest Call Apple magazine is available as a PDF to download. All you have to do is be a member of Call Apple. Go to their site, log in. Sign up, log in, and it's $27.95 US every year. You get discounts on their new books and software, and you get a free copy of the latest Call Apple. It includes Kansas Fest 2017 review, 29 years and counting. An afternoon spent in applesauce, the Apple II disk browsers reviewed, 3D demo, and 6502 assembler, all kinds of great stuff. So check that out.
Awesome. Yeah, that 3D demo, just going to call that out. That's been getting posted on the Apple II Enthusiasts Facebook group quite a bit. The guy working on that's doing great stuff. He's basically he's building a 3D engine, and it's really looking good. He continues to post really impressive videos of that. So nice to see that written up in Call Apple.
Awesome.
Well, it's a good month for Apple II magazines. The longest running Apple II magazine, Juiced GS, has shipped its latest issue with the lovely cover photo from the Kansas Fest 2017 gathering, which is, of course, a tradition there. They post a cover photo involving everyone who contributed that year, and always with some fun theme. This time around, it's the 40th anniversary of the Apple II, so they're throwing a birthday party for the Apple II. And sort of the photo is kind of shot from the Apple II's perspective, so which is kind of adorable. So definitely check that out if you're not already a Juiced GS subscriber. We'll link to that so you can sign up for it. And looks like Ken Gagne, editor-in-chief over there, has got a little present for us. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, so a few months back, we ran another audio clip that he did interviewing John Brooks, and that went over really well and kind of helped them, I hope, sell a few issues, and people responded really well at our end to that. They enjoyed that, so Ken has sent along another audio clip of an interview that's included in this month's Juice.js, and this is with Sean Fahey. He is talking specifically about the garage giveaway, and I'm sure they cover plenty of other topics. So here is that audio.
Hello, this is Ken Gagne, Editor-in-Chief of Juice.js, the last remaining print publication dedicated to the Apple II computer, found online at www.juiced.gs. This past summer, I attended my 20th Kansas Fest, the annual Apple II Expo held in Kansas City, Missouri. And a mainstay of most of those events has been the Garage Giveaway, organized by Sean Fahey and James Littlejohn. Sean and James, two Midwest Apple II users, have for years been traveling the country salvaging every Apple II they can get their hands on, whether it's a giant lot being donated from New Jersey or Seattle for which they rent U-Hauls and drive it back to Kansas City, or it's just a small local user group and somebody who's downsizing, retiring, or moving and wants to get rid of their own personal collection. What do they do with all this hardware and software and documentation? They bring these literal tons of artifacts to Kansas Fest and give it away for free. For many people, this is a reason to come to Kansas Fest, where they can find those long-lost software programs, manuals, or floppy drives that they've been looking for their own personal setup. This generosity comes at a cost, not to the recipients, but to the benefactors. All that traveling and storage ain't free. And for that reason, this year's Garage Giveaway was advertised to be the last. About a month after Kansas Fest, I sat down with Sean Fahey to talk about the history and future of this event, as well as his motivations for doing so. The full interview can be found in the September 2017 issue of Juice.js. That's Volume 22, Issue 3. What you are about to hear is an excerpt of that interview. Hey, Sean.
Hey, Ken. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I can't complain too much.
Thank you for taking time out of your Sunday to chat with me. I appreciate it.
No worries, man.
So I remember going to Kansas Fest and you inviting people over to your house to help clean out the garage. What is the history of that event? When did you start inviting people to help you get rid of some of this stuff?
Probably it was around 2000 or 2001. Might have been even before that. I started going to Kansas Fest in, I think, 98 or 99. It was a great experience. People were very welcoming and sharing with me, and I had a garage full of equipment, so I thought I'd reciprocate.
So a lot of people have a lot of Apple II equipment, but eventually it gets to a point where they either stop collecting or they need to actually downsize. Instead, you went all in and tried to grow your collection as big as possible. How did you decide to go that way?
It was an accident. When I got back into the Apple II scene, originally I had dropped out back in the day, went maybe a PC. For several years, I was totally away from the Apple II. And then one day I found an Applewin, the emulator, online, and I downloaded it. And then this fit of nostalgia kind of took over. And I decided to reacquire another new Apple II, a new to me, and picked one up off eBay. About the same time, I joined the local Apple II user group. And I told the other attendees, there weren't very many of them, just a handful of people, that I was interested in getting more Apple II equipment. And they said, well, great, we've got excess that we'd like to get rid of. And then next thing I know, the president of the Apple II group was, anytime somebody would call them up and say, hey, we got this Apple II we want to get rid of, is anyone interested in it? She would send them my way. People just kind of came out of the woodwork once word got out that I was taking all this junk that they wanted to get rid of. And I was more than happy to take it because I was really enjoying the Apple II. So before I knew it, I had filled up the garage, my office, part of a storage shed, and it got kind of out of hand. My wife was on my case about collecting so much of it, and justifiably, because I really had a lot. Then I found out about Kansas Fest. I think it was Delphi at the time. I got invited to attend in the evenings, and made some contacts. And then when I came the next year, that's when I decided that I was going to invite everyone down the following year to my garage to kind of clean it out.
When you invited all the Kansas Festers or K-Festers to come to your garage to help clean it out, why did you decide to give all that equipment away instead of selling it or putting it on eBay?
It's kind of a personal thing of mine that, if I come by something freely, I'm going to give it away freely. I wasn't interested in making a buck. And to be honest, the first few Kansas Fests, I was more interested in showing my wife that I was getting rid of things and not really necessarily charging for it. I just wanted to thin out the garage, make her happy, and also, I was getting that warm, fuzzy feeling from being of service to the community. But like I said, generally, if things come my way freely, I'm going to give them away freely. The main reason we started bringing things to Kansas Fest as opposed to having people down for the garage is the attendance kind of went up at Kansas Fest for one thing. And it was harder to manage. It was okay to manage 30 some odd people coming into the garage, but 40, 50, 60 was another thing entirely. James attended one year, and we didn't really hook up until his second year when he was bringing some products that he was making. We became friends and later on roommates, and we hit upon the idea that instead of having people in my garage, we would just load everything into the big green bus and bring it to Kansas Fest.
What have been some of the reasons that people are getting rid of their Apple II collections?
Well, some people are just getting older. Some of them are going through a process where they're downsizing. They're moving into a smaller apartment. They don't have a house anymore, so they don't have anywhere to store the gear. Or they're moving into or maybe a retirement community. Unfortunately, some collections we've picked up have been from people who've just passed away. Their survivors have no idea what to do with it. Through various connections, they found me, and I would come and get it. There's been a few people who have just decided this is a hobby that's not for them after an initial, nostalgic outbreak. Some people going through divorce, and they decided they want to get rid of everything. There's various reasons, but it makes me want to encourage people in the Apple II community to have a plan for their collection, because if something happens to them, or have a plan for what they should have happen to their collection after they're gone, or can't make decisions about it anymore, because sometimes your survivors will not want to deal with it all, and they'll just send it to a landfill. And if that's a troubling thought for you, then have a plan B so that they know what to do with it.
What's the farthest you've gone for a collection?
We actually flew down to Florida and rented a cargo truck down there and drove it back. That's when we brought back a huge amount of Macintosh equipment, in addition to some Apple II stuff. Sometimes what we'll do is work out with the person, if they're willing, is we'll have it shipped to us. The man collection, it was so huge, it took up the majority of a moving van, the 18-wheeler variety, and it was tremendously expensive to do, but he had so much stuff, and so much of it was of historical value that, through donations and my own money, we just had it all shipped here in a big old moving van, and it took up the majority of a storage unit. We've been dipping in it for over 5 years now, bringing it to Kansas Fest. It was so huge. It's the biggest collection we've ever brought in, probably short of the one load of 50 Apple II GSs I brought in one time.
Can you estimate how much the man collection weighed?
7 or 8 tons.
Have you ever found something really rare or unexpected in one of these collections?
Well, sometimes I'll find accelerators, or back when they were kind of rare, big RAM cards or things that were worth something. I'd always tell the person who was getting rid of it, I said, you could sell this and make some money. And every single time they would say, no, I'm giving it to you for you to deal with.
Are you ever downsizing your own collection? Is anything that you bring to the garage giveaway actually yours?
I'm moving soon, and I've packed up all my Apple II stuff that for my own personal collection. It's all in storage right now. But I foresee the day when probably at least half of it will probably go to the garage giveaway.
All this travel around the country to pick up these collections, the transportation and the storage to and from Rockhurst, there are expenses associated with those. You always put out the donation box for people to contribute, and in the past that historically has not covered your expenses. So you decided to use GoFundMe a few years ago, and if I recall, you weren't all that optimistic when you went in. What was your experience ultimately with GoFundMe?
It was very successful. It allowed me to pay off the majority of bringing in the Michael Mann collection. it allowed me to have some breathing room. So, I mean, the storage for the garage giveaway stuff's about $100 a month. The guy I get the storage from, he's a nice guy. He's a friend of mine. He's done me the favor of letting me kind of ride on the billing now and then. But ultimately, I always have to catch up with him. And getting the GoFundMe going, that allowed me to pay back a lot of what I owed him. So, but since my wife has passed away, now a single income, and I just can't see myself using that storage for much longer. And that's why we're trying to downsize the rest of the garage giveaway to the point where I don't need to use the storage anymore. And anything that I keep in the future is probably going to go back to what I keep in the garage of the new house.
It sounds like the donation box last month at Kansas Fest, people were much more generous with it than they usually are. It sounds like you were able to catch up on a lot of your billing.
That's true. Jason Scott kind of put out the call, and a lot of people responded, and I'm very grateful and thankful for the community for helping me out, because I was able to get totally caught up. That took a tremendous burden off my shoulders, and I can't thank the community enough for their help.
That recent windfall allowed you to catch up on your billing, but it didn't necessarily create a cushion for the future. Do you see a day when there is no more garage giveaway?
We're kind of trying to wind the garage giveaway down somewhat. This last year was the biggest load we've ever brought because we were trying to clean out the storage shed, and we could not do it. There's still stuff there to get rid of. We were thinking to ourselves that 2017, 18 might be the last year of the garage giveaway as is. I don't know. Depends on the collection, I guess. If it's something of value to the community, we'll probably go after it. If not, then we'll probably skip it. I would hate to see the garage giveaway go away. I mean, it's fun. You get to be kind of like Santa Claus, and it's nice to be able to share with the community. But there's a lot of work involved. I think we're trying to look at the balance between the labor and the fun part.
Well, certainly it's fun for us attendees as well, and I don't look forward to the day when we don't have the garage giveaway to look forward to. So my thanks to you and to James for everything you've done over the many years storing this equipment, collecting it, delivering it, and donating it. It's been a highlight of my Kansas Fest. Full disclosure, I've donated to offset the expenses of the garage giveaway, and any Open Apple listener who wishes to do the same may do so online at paypal.me/A2fan. Sean, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story.
All right, Ken, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Ken, for sending that along. And we look forward to many more great issues of Juice.js.
Definitely. All right. One more hardware item here this month. We've got a DIY memory card for the 2GS. And I'm glad you caught this one because I was going to post it and actually missed it. So if you're a Hackaday reader, as I am, it's always great to see Apple II stuff show up on there. It doesn't happen very often. So it's kind of like... I was liken it to seeing your teacher at the grocery store. It's this weird sort of mixing of contexts that you don't expect. Anyway, someone posted there, they made their own Apple IIgs RAM card. So there's a little write-up on that, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So is this something you're going to build? Do you need to build?
I might if I had my 2GS physically present. I currently do not. Which is ironic because I'm actually working on some 2GS software right now, but my machine is not physically near me. So I'm going to have to find a way to remedy that here before too long. And I'm sure my dad would very much like me to get that stuff out of his basement. But yeah, as of currently, I don't have access to it. But it's a ROM 1 with the original 1.25 meg expansion in it. So, of course, nowadays for a few bucks, you can go to 8 megs without breaking a sweat. So I might do that when and if I get it back.
Great.
So, anyway. Speaking of 2GS development, of course, so at the 2017 Kansas Fest, we had lightning talks, which was a lot of fun. And they are, 5-minute talks on whatever topic you want. And they're very, very fast. And one of my favorites was Jeremy Rand, who did a 5-minute talk on his 2GS build pipeline. So, of course, we've talked a lot about the kind of collaboration that went on between him and me and Carrington to develop a Mac and Xcode based Apple II build pipeline. And so Jeremy's gone off and done the same thing for the 2GS, and his lightning talk was where he built 5 GS apps in 5 minutes, and using this pipeline, it's that fast. He built he built a classic desk accessory and a new desk accessory and a desktop app and a console app and all this stuff. It was really cool. So he's been working on that build pipeline. I actually installed kind of the beta version of it at Kansas Fest and played with it a bunch, so I can attest to how effective it is. And he's been polishing that up and refining the templates and stuff. So it's now officially released, so you can go get it, and it's got full install instructions. It depends on a lot of third-party tools. So the installation of it, you got to jump through a few hoops. Depends on Golden Gate, the kind of bridge to the Orca tools, and of course Orca, and it depends on the GS Plus emulator and Profuse for file system integration and some other things. So there's a bunch of pieces you install, but it's not difficult. You just follow his steps and it works. And you're one hotkey build and run on 2GS for any type of 2GS software that you want to write, GSOS and everything. So it's very cool. And if you're going to write, proper desktop GSOS GS software, this is I think the way to go on the Mac for sure.
Awesome.
If you're on Windows, got to give it a shout out to Merlin 32, of course, from Brutal Deluxe, which is an outstanding option over there as well. I think those guys don't get enough love for how much work went into Merlin 32 and what a great piece of software that is on the Windows side.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so that is it for that. I think that's it for our news items, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, I think that's all we've got for this month.
All right. Well, I've got a tech segment, the much missed segment that we haven't run in a long time. So we got a bumper for it. So why don't we throw that in here?
Hit that music.
Fasten your seat bits and warm up your soldering irons. It's time to talk tech.
So this month I wanted to talk about GS graphics programming a little bit. I mentioned I've been getting into GS stuff this year, and I want to talk about the fast GS graphics pipeline, because it's kind of, if you want to write any kind of game or anything on the 2GS, this is essential knowledge. And back in the day, it was kind of mystery, voodoo, black magic knowledge. But nowadays, with the wonders of the internet, it's fairly easy to find this information, and it's pretty critical. So as many people know, the Achilles heel of 2GS, of course, is that while it has all this great graphics, the super high res mode, 320 by 200, 16 colors per line, 4,096 colors, 16 palettes, all this great stuff. The problem is you can only write to the video buffer at 1 megahertz. And this is for obscure backward compatibility reasons with the Apple II and with the 8-bit Apple IIs. And it's really, really crippling especially the machine already is crippled with a 2.8 megahertz clock speed. Insert your favorite conspiracy theory here as to why it was given that clock speed. But the further limitation of the 1 megahertz speed to write to video memory is nearly ruins the entire machine, frankly. But complicated, weird retro graphics hardware to the rescue. There is a series of things you can do to actually get around that problem. So the first appearance of this technique, as far as I could tell, was in an official Apple TechNote, TechNote 2GS 70, which is called Tips for Fast Graphics. And they posted kind of the first version of this technique that I could find. And it was further elaborated on in the famous French book, 2GS Épluché, 2GS Peeled, which of course is sort of the Bible of the 2GS demo scene and some of the better games that came out in the early and mid 90s. But the technique basically takes advantage of the fact that the 2GS has a series of different pieces that all serve weird, unrelated functions, but when you put them all together, allow you to get around the video memory problem. So one of those features is this thing called memory shadowing. So the Apple II, in kind of an 8-bit compatibility mode, it runs entirely out of banks 0 and 1. And of course, the 65816 has access to many, many banks of memory, each of them 64K in size. So the way it works is each bank acts like, an entire Apple II worth of memory. There's a series of 64K banks starting at 0 and going upwards. And the first 2 banks are for sort of Apple II compatibility. And but a lot of the firmware and stuff actually lives in upper banks called E0 and E1, and those are kind of reserved special banks in the 2GS. And so a lot of the traditional firmware soft switches and stuff like this, on the hardware page and so on, lives up there. So that would be weird for the 8-bit Apple II software, which of course doesn't know that these far up memory banks exist. So there's this memory shadowing feature that they put in where you can write to banks 0 and 1, and it will automatically write for free to those upper banks. And so that's a neat feature on its own. But then you combine that with the 2GS has the ability to move the stack pointer, which is a very nice feature. So you can put the stack basically anywhere you want in the page, and it also has the ability to move the direct page, the 0 page. You can also put that anywhere you want in memory. So you combine all these things, and what you end up with is this very strange workaround where you can put the stack in video memory and place the stack pointer anywhere you want. Let me start over. So you can put the stack in page 1 or page 0, but page 1 where in the 2000 area where the traditional video memory lies. You can put it there, and when you then push values onto the stack, what happens is they get memory shadowed into bank E1 in the 2000 area, which is actually where the 2GS frame buffer lives, the super high res page. So the stack operates at the full clock speed of 2.8 megahertz. So using this memory shadowing and stack relocation technique, you've actually just kind of worked around the video memory limit of 1 megahertz. So it's a very clever technique. Of course, the trick is then you have to do all of your pixel writing by pushing and popping things off the stack and moving the stack pointer around, which is a very strange way to write to video memory. So for example, if you're going to fill a rectangle, you put the stack pointer at the end of one line of your rectangle and you push a bunch of bytes on. And see, the other nice thing about this technique is pushing moves the pointer for you. Again, you get that pointer math for free then. So you can just do a whole bunch of pushes and it writes those pixels into video memory and moves the pointer for you, and then you can move it up a line and keep going. So it gets pretty into the weeds once you start mixing and matching these techniques with some of the new addressing modes like the stack relative modes and so on that you can do. But that's the basics of this technique, and it's exceptionally powerful and pretty straightforward to understand once you get all of the pieces and how they fit together. It's actually very easy to implement once you understand just which soft switches to flip to get things into this mode. And of course, it's a very fragile state once you're into this mode, because of course you've messed up the direct page, you've messed up a bunch of CPU state and all this to get into this mode. So you have to save and restore everything between drawing to the screen and so on. But it's not too difficult to get this going once you understand it. So I'm going to link to the original Apple Tech Note and the 2GS Épluché book, which is available on archive.org. And I'm also going to link to apple2.gs. That's Dagan Brock's site for amalgamating all these 2GS resources. It's got all tech notes and books and everything that are out there for the 2GS. It's a great resource. And I'm also going to link to kind of the latest developments of this technique, which is Brutal Deluxe has this tool called Mr. Sprite. And so the thing about this weird 2GS stack pushing technique is that it's sufficiently complicated that you really don't want to be writing general purpose code to push data that way. This is where sprite compiling really shines, where you write code, you write special purpose code that can just knows how to draw one particular sprite, and you give it a place in video memory that you want it to write that sprite. One of the great things about this 65816 is that it has 16-bit registers, which doesn't sound like such a big deal, except when you understand that you can use 16-bit indexes with the indexed addressing modes. So that's huge. That means you can access any position in a 64K bank of memory using an indexed addressing mode. So that is incredibly powerful. And among the many benefits of that is you can refer to screen positions with a single index register. So when you want to draw something on the screen, you don't have to pass in X and Y coordinates, and you're not doing all this crazy 16-bit math, in 8-bit registers like you are in the 6502 just to get access to an entire horizontal line, and, all those problems go away. So in that sense, the 2GS is really nice. And so sprite compiling has really been taken to the next level by Mr. Sprite, and they have a really great page that explains how it works. It's essentially, it's a sprite compiler, but it's a very, very sophisticated one, and it writes really, really fast compiled sprite code. And it's also very powerful. It can be sort of your entire R pipeline. It does all sorts of flipping and mirroring and banking of sprites for you and all these other great tools. And but one of the nice things about it is how well documented it is. They've written an entire separate page on their website, which I will link to, which explains the technology behind it, and by extension explains this entire process that I've just talked about. It's probably the single best primer on fast 2GS rendering that I've ever seen. And so just reading that, you will understand all these concepts very quickly. So kudos to them for that. And I'll give a little preview here. So all these tools, Mr. Sprite and everything, they are all officially kind of Windows-based, but the code is all pretty portable. And so I've actually been working on a Mac version of all this stuff. And I've got it working locally, so someone wants to see an early copy of that, let me know. I've been talking to Olivier over there as well, and he's been kind of helping integrate some of the changes back in to make it a little more portable. So I'm hoping to get their permission to put the stuff up on GitHub. Assuming that goes good, then we'll have Mac versions of this stuff available pretty soon. So that's my spiel on fast 2GS rendering. If people have questions, feel free to email me. I'm far from an expert on this stuff. Someone like John Brooks or Antoine and Olivier over at Brutal Deluxe are certainly more acquainted with it than I am. But I thought I'd just give a high-level overview of what people are talking about when they talk about this stuff.
That's really awesome. Thank you very much, Quinn, for that. And I would also like to plug Dagon's GS Programmer's Home website a little bit more. It's a resource that I think we've mentioned in the past, but we haven't, I don't know. I feel like maybe we've given it short shrift by not talking more about it. It's got, in addition to all of these manuals, both from Apple and third-party sources on how to program the 2GS, there's programmer forums, compilers, and as well as links to other websites that can really kind of help you along your way if you're just learning to program the 2GS, or even if you're interested to find out what all that's about. So we need to have Dagon on the show, I think, at some point to talk about that stuff, because he's done some really interesting things as well for programming for the 2GS.
Mm-hmm, for sure, yeah. Apple2.gs. All the books are up there. Most of the Apple ones, most of the third-party ones as well. All the Apple Tech Notes are up there. There's a conversation forum. You can go in there and get questions asked. He's even started a translation effort of the French 2GS A Pliché book, which I'm sure he would love assistance with if anyone out there is French-English bilingual. And has more free time than I do, which is why I have not jumped on that myself. It is an amazing book, but you do need a pretty solid grasp of French to read it.
Yep.
But yes, apple2.gs, good stuff. All right, I think we've got an eBay segment, do we not?
Looks like we do, Quinn.
Except that we don't talk about eBay.
That's right.
Look, rare! Steve Jobs. Look what we found on eBay.
So as we don't talk about eBay, what are we not talking about?
All right. Today we are not talking about an item that came up. It's a home automation system for the Apple II. And I put this in here because I like this stuff and I like this item. Mm-hmm. I've always kind of thought that, trying to think of modern uses for this retro hardware, home automation strikes me as something that Apple IIs can still do quite effectively and in a fun way. I've often toyed with this idea of just having my Apple II sitting on a desk in the corner of my kitchen or something, running the lights and whatever in the house. And it would be, frankly, pretty easy to do. And it doesn't take a lot of horsepower, so it'd be a great use of an Apple II. So there were official systems for doing this back in the day, and one of them was X10, which still exists. X10 kind of evolved into Insteon and Smart Home stuff, but X10 in its pure form does still exist. You can still buy those lamp controllers and stuff. They're kind of terrible. They work through by sending signals through the AC power line, which is great in principle, but in practice doesn't work all that well because AC power lines, especially in older houses, are really noisy. And there are issues with phase because half of your outlets are on different phase from the other half. And if you try to send a signal from one phase to the other, the signal actually has to go out into the street through a transformer and back, which then introduces noise from all of your neighbors' houses. So if you've ever tried to set up one of these systems, which I have, what you get is it'll work great like for a month, and then everything will stop working and you don't know why. And it's because your neighbor bought a new microwave or something. Like it's that weird. So there's a reason that the better systems now do this with, mesh networks and Wi-Fi instead of trying to send signals through the power lines. But anyway, if you want to play with this stuff, you can still buy it. And there was an official Apple II interface package to X10 with a card that would send commands to X10 modules. So it would be fun to dig up one of these cards and just get it going because, as I say, the modules still exist and you can still buy them. But I will say it probably works even worse now than it did at the time because now what's been introduced in a big way in modern homes is switching power supplies. They exist in every wall wart now. They used to be fairly uncommon, but now every single charging dongle and wall wart that you have has a switching power supply in it, and those things are very, very noisy. So every single USB charger that you have is going to make a mess of this thing. But anyway, it was neat to see this system come up on eBay, so we will link to it in the show notes.
X10 was always one of those holy grail Apple II products that I lusted and drooled over when I was younger, but was, the kits sold for, hundreds of dollars, and some of them were modularized. So like you could get like the basic kit for $50, but if you wanted anything useful out of it, then, there was $20 here, $15 there for parts. and my parents were having none of that. So it is neat to see that these things still exist in like complete kit form here and there. You can find them on eBay. This one's probably around the original retail price. Looks like $120, but I don't know if that's something that you wanted to play with when you were younger and never had the chance. Stuff like this is a good way to go, I think.
Yep. Yeah, and you could have fun with it too. I mean, nowadays you could throw an Ethernet 2 in your Apple II and do this over the internet too, probably, and control your lights and stuff that way.
Even better.
But X10 was always one of those things where they nickel and dime you to death, and it's also it doesn't work as well as you hoped it would, and it's always sort of disappointing. But,
I don't know. This sounds like the plot for a bad sci-fi movie where some basement dwelling miscreant uses X10 to take over his neighbors' houses and kill everyone.
Yes, I would watch that movie. All right.
We're easily amused here on Open Apple.
We are, especially if there's an Apple II in the loop.
That's right.
We're amused at 1 megahertz.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's it for eBay, and let's do some feedback.
Sounds good.
You've listened to us talk. Now it's time to tell us what you think.
All right, so we've got a little bit of a backlog here, a couple items for me. So this is actually an old item, but I haven't had a chance to talk about it yet, so I want to bring it up. In a bunch of the Soft Talk reviews that we've done, we've often talked about Howard Soft, and that's one of the funny little companies run out of some guy's house in Reseda that just had a little text blurb as an ad and made mystery tax software nobody knew anything about. And I think a couple months ago, a user wrote in to tell us that actually Howard Soft still exists, and they still make that tax software for, of course, modern machines, and they've kept it going continuously. And you could have, as this person had continuously upgraded their Howard Soft packages and files and kept their tax returns this way all along. So at Kansas Fest, Jeremy Barhard, one of our Australian listeners, flagged me down, and he had found one of the earlier ads for Howard Soft that used images, because we had only seen the little text ones. So they started to do better in their later years, and they relocated to La Jolla, and they got a nice logo, and they were paying for full page photograph ads. So he sent this to me via email. I will try and put it in the show notes. We have some ability to host images on our show notes page, so I will try to put that in there. But it's a really funny ad because it's literally a photograph of the front of the package. It says Tax Preparer by Howard Soft. And above that, filling most of the page, is a photo of a blonde woman looking sort of sultry and sort of sideways on a bed or a couch of some sort. And that's it. It's just Tax Preparer software in front of blonde women looking sultry. It's the strangest thing. And the headline is Relax. So I guess, yeah, that's using sex to sell tax software, but it's very strange and very amusing. So yes, this must be shared. So we will share it. Moving right along. Let's see. Listener Eric writes in to say, "Hi, Quinn and Mike. Since I learned about the Apple II renaissance that is happening now as retro enthusiasts preserve the unique experiences we had growing up in the 80s, I have been listening to your old shows, and you have a goldmine here. These interviews are precious insights into the wizards who manifested their ideas by pushing their retro machines to the max. They will inspire us to create the next wave where retro technologies partner with modern platforms to create amazing experiences." So I thought that was a nice summary of retro computing in general. So thanks for that, listener Eric.
Just don't go back too far, Eric. Some of those early episodes around 1, 2, and 3 of Open Apple are really rough, and you're sort of, buyer beware. You're on your own if you listen to those. No, I can't be held responsible for any damage.
Yes. All the years before I joined were just terrible. I assume. I don't know.
Next month's guest is really going to like to hear that.
Yes. Okay, so moving right along, got a nice email from listener Simon, who says, "I recently bought an Apple IIe Platinum and have been researching display options. I've never owned an Apple II before, so it's all new to me. I love getting emails from retro computing enthusiasts who are new to the Apple II. Maybe they had a Commodore or an Atari back in the day, and they've just gotten into an Apple II now, which I love that. Anyway, so he says, I've never owned an Apple II before, so it's all new to me. I was having a look at your blog and was looking at the photos of your display in Digital Archaeology Part 2. I can link to that in the show notes. And it looks like you're getting a really nice picture on your LCD panel. He says, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind telling me what that setup is. Does that display have a composite input, or are you using a converter of some type? Great question, and probably one of the number one things talked about in the Apple II world is how the heck do you get a good display, particularly for 80-column video. So, of course, the two-word answer, as Kansas Fest attendees all know, is Night Owl. So the monitor he's seeing in my blog is a Night Owl security monitor. It's a 4.3 8-inch monitor with two composite inputs designed for security camera installations. And just entirely by chance, it happens to be really, really great at showing Apple II video. It shows 80-column text, really, really nice. The colors are vibrant. It's a great size. It sits nicely on top of the Apple IIc. It's easy to take apart and paint if you want a color match to your Apple II, as Chris Torrance did, which looks really nice. It's, modern LCDs, as we've talked about a lot on the show, are a real crapshoot with the Apple II. The Apple II signal is not quite NTSC, it's NTSC-ish, and it's really up to how well the converter and scaler in your particular LCD panel is, because of course it's taking an analog video signal and mapping it to digital LCD pixels, unlike CRTs, which were more like radios in that they were receiving an analog signal and modifying an analog device based on that signal, namely the electron gun. The horizontal portion of a CRT monitor is basically a radio. So that means that they can be much more forgiving with the signal being out of spec, because everything's just kind of analog anyway. Whereas once you're doing an analog to digital conversion, now that analog spec really matters, because that digital converter is making decisions about this is a pixel, this is not, this is a front porch, this is not, and so on. So any LCD will render the Apple II, and most look okay in 40 columns or some of the lower res graphics modes. High res, regular high res usually looks okay. Low res always looks fine. But double high res and 80 column text in particular can be real tricky. And there's really no way to know except just trying it which one is going to work. So that's why everybody latched onto the Night Owl. I was looking for small 4:3 displays to bring to Kansas Fest, and I found the security monitor was a good search term to use in Amazon and eBay. So that's how I landed on this thing. I just bought one and it happened to work great. So I spread the word and here we are. Now the Night Owl security monitor is no longer available. That company stopped making it. Yeah, it's funny. The prices spiked for a while. Apple II users started buying them. Yeah. And then they stopped being available. Then they showed up again briefly on eBay. Someone presumably bought up all the old Night Owl stock and they were selling them on eBay. And apparently they were kind of rejects, or some of them were returns. We don't know, but a lot of people were getting bad ones from that eBay seller. The eBay seller was replacing them, but that's kind of a hassle. So anyway, that's the situation on the composite front. Now, these days, we're getting much better modern converters. So nowadays, on my Apple II, for example, I'm using A2 Heaven's Apple II VGA scaler for the 2C, the Apple IIc VGA, which is a little box that plugs into the back of the 2C and generates absolutely perfect VGA video. And it's flawless and it's inexpensive and it just works. And I can't imagine doing it any other way now. So that's the direction I would recommend people go these days. And he has one for the 2E as well. And he's working on a 2GS one, Ultimate Apple II, Ultimate Micro. What's Ultimate Micro they're called these days. Ultimate Micro is also building a universal Apple II HDMI converter. We saw some previews of that at Kansas Fest. So many great things in the pipe for getting proper video out of your Apple II. But that's the state of the art there.
Awesome.
All right, well, that's all the emails I have, actually. Do you have any that you're sitting on, Mike?
I do have one, and maybe we should have covered this in the news section, but we'll do it here anyway. AM, the anonymous new Apple II news mailer that we hear from every now and then, sent us along a link about, so everybody's seen the Terminator, 1984. If you're an Apple II fan and you've seen it, which you have, you know that the display, when they're showing POV video of the Terminator looking at things, you can see the key perfect object, or the key perfect codes that were run in Nibble magazine that helped you make sure that your programs were typed bug free and you didn't have to go through character by character trying to find errors and things like that. Somebody over at skynetsarmy.net, which is a Terminator fan web page, actually took a closer look, saw that the program that the Key Perfect had run on was called ovly.obj, and hunted down that program in Nibble magazine. And so now we know what program Key Perfect was being run on, which
wow.
Right. So I don't know that this is all that groundbreaking, but it just nerds be nerds, I guess.
Yeah, I love that someone tracked that down.
Yep.
Oh, internet.
So that's all I have this month.
All right. Excellent. Well, I think that might also wrap it up for the show. Any closing thoughts, Mike?
No, other than to say thank you very much to our continued monthly Patreon donors. We really appreciate it. All the money that you donate goes to help with bandwidth. We long ago exceeded our free level limit, which I guess is good because that means people are listening, but it does cost us to host and provide this thing. So if you donate by Patreon, that helps us out and we really appreciate it. I'm not going to list names right now because I will forget people and offend. And so just thank you as a group. We really appreciate that. Also, thank you, Seth, for coming on the show and talking about 8-Bit Weapon. That's great stuff. We love it.
Yeah, many thanks. And I'll second thanks to our Patreon patrons. You know who you are. And we'll have a link in that on our main page and, of course, in the show notes if anyone wants to become a Patreon patron and help make sure that poor Mike does not go broke and crazy editing and hosting this show.
Well, it's either one or the other. Please not both. And again, yes, buy a copy of Class Apples from 8-Bit Weapon over on Bandcamp. You can get that now.
Yes. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody, and we will see you next month.
Sounds good. Bye, everybody.
This has been the Open Apple Podcast. Subscribe to us in iTunes or visit us at open-apple.net, where you can browse our extensive catalogue of past episodes or read our blog. If you like what you've heard today, or even if you didn't, your comments, questions or ideas are always welcome. Send them to feedback at open-apple.net.
Learning.